I was able to check out an opening night screening of Luca Guadagnino's new movie Challengers, and I'm here to let you know what I think of it. So, going into this movie, I was pretty excited because the trailer was released last June, as the movie was supposed to come out last year, but unfortunately it was pushed to this year due to the strikes. And online, this movie developed quite a reputation for being the movie that seemingly featured Zendaya having a threesome. And while there's aspects of that in there, I don't think that properly describes what this movie is. And if that's holding you back from seeing it, I would give it a shot because that's not how I would describe the movie. And the basic plot description of the movie would be Zendaya plays Tashi, a very talented tennis player who meets these two really close friends, Art and Patrick, played by Mike Feist and Josh O'Connor, respectively. And they have a very intertwined relationship and basically spans this 13-year period how their lives come together, go apart, and where the sport and their relationships take them. And it's a really interesting movie. The biggest compliment I can give it is the three performances are amazing. These actors really sell all their roles. Zendaya is a lot of fun to see acting outside of type. Her biggest roles that she's known for are Spider-Man, Disney Channel, so it's fun to see her in this very different role. And her character goes in a lot of directions. You like her at times, you hate her at times, you feel sad for her at times, and she does a great job playing at it. Both the guys are great. You see why Zendaya would like them, you see why she wouldn't like certain qualities about them, and they really seem like real people, and you understand why they're friends. This movie wouldn't work really well if all the characters didn't feel like they had they cared about each other, but you do feel the care for each character that they have in the movie. So that was really good. I thought Mike Feist was the most sympathetic out of all the characters. Art is the one you like the most, but all the characters are flawed, have things you like about them and things that you get annoyed about. You definitely feel like you're a character in the movie where there's times where you're like really happy about what's going on, other times where you're angry at the characters like you're their friend. And that's a really good thing. It makes you feel very immersed. Another great quality about the movie is the score. The score is absolutely phenomenal. I It gets you really invested and it's really cool because it has some fast-paced music and it doesn't just play during tennis sequences. It also plays during emotional moments and makes them feel really intense and builds up to this big moment. And the score was done by Atticus Ross and Trent Reznor, and obviously they're great composers and fantastic score. It really gets you into the scenes and has you very invested. So that was a great plus. And another thing I really enjoyed about the movie was the tennis sequences. And I think even if you're not a tennis fan, you will really appreciate these sequences. They make the sport feel very cinematic. You're very immersed and it feels like almost an action scene where there's cinematography that does it, there's what's at stake in some of these tennis matches. So you really care about who's winning. There was one point where I was holding some candy in my hand and towards the end of the match I realized I was crushing it because I was like so in suspense and worried about what's going to happen. There's the cinematography though, not just in the tennis sequences, but throughout the whole movie. But there, in the tennis sequences, it really shines. Where there's one scene where we actually are in the perspective of the tennis ball bouncing back and forth through the match, and it's really really impressive. I don't know how they did it. And there's a bunch of other scenes, but that was just one of the standouts to me. Where really is a really cool way to visualize the game. Where they could have just played it like an ESPN broadcast, but they get really creative with how they film it, and it just is a lot of fun to watch, even if you're not into sport. And that's the best thing a sports movie can do: get you invested, even if you're not a sports fan. Another thing that is worth knowing going to this movie is there's a lot of time jumping. It uses a non-linear storytelling method, so we jump from different years, different like periods of people's careers. Sometimes we jump and relationships are different. And I think the movie did a really good job helping you know where you were in the story. Because sometimes when movies jump, and this movie jumps sometimes like a year, sometimes 3 years, sometimes 13 years. So you have to be able to know where you are at different times. And this movie does a really good job, not just with text on the screen telling you where you are, but characters, their hairstyles, their relationships, where they're at in their career, you can instantly put it together. There was only one time where I caught myself getting confused, and that was only because there was a tennis match happening, and in two different time periods, the same two people were in the match. So it was a little confusing, but I picked up right away, and I was really impressed. When I saw that we were jumping around, I was like, this could get a bit confusing because we're not jumping around that far, but wasn't confusing. It worked really well, and it made it more intense. Where if you went a linear storytelling method for this, sometimes you would jump, and what could be a good tense point later on, you would have already had the answer to in the past. But it puts us in the perspective of certain characters where they don't know something happened in the past, and we don't know either, and then we find out. And that was really cool. Made it for a really interesting viewing experience, and I thought it worked really well. So those are most of the positives I'd give. I think the performances, score, cinematography, tennis matches, time jumping, all was excellent. It's a very, very great movie. I don't have any negatives, but I have two things I would like warn people about if this bothers them. These aren't negatives for me, but just something to keep a lookout on. So one thing is you can feel the runtime a bit. The movie's about 2 hours and 15 minutes, and that didn't bother me at all. The movie's never boring, but you do realize it does feel like a long movie, and it feels like the story's going on for a bit, but that's a good thing. It lets us build up our characters, and it's never boring, so it's not a negative at all. Just if you're someone who doesn't love longer movies or thinks that sports movies maybe shouldn't be that long, just something to keep your mind on. But didn't bother me at all, and I thought actually the longer runtime really benefited the movie. And the final thing I would say to just know going into it is the ending is a bit abrupt. I had no clue about that going in, so it kind of just cuts, and I was left a little in shock. My girlfriend was like, "How is that an ending?" And I agree, and we both were like, it does have an ending to a character arc, to some character arcs, but some of the plot lines aren't fully resolved. Some other character arcs aren't fully resolved. So it's more of you get a resolution, but not all the resolution. And that'll leave a good bit of the audience disappointed. It didn't really affect it for me. Definitely let your mind create your own ending. But it's just something to know where do not go into this thinking you're going to get like this huge sports odyssey where you're going to find out where these characters end up. We really are just seeing this time period, and we don't figure out anything that happens after in their lives past this time period. But not a negative, just something to keep in mind before you see it. But overall, this is a fantastic movie. All the performances are excellent. I would highly recommend going to see this in theaters. The tennis sequences alone justify that ticket, and definitely go check it out. For me, I'd give it a 5 out of 5, and yeah, don't have any flaws and would highly recommend it.